The Last of Us 2 is a depressing, beautiful mess all at the same time. I knew it was going to be one of those really divisive games going into it. Metacritic is getting review bombed, paid critics are getting paid to, shill. What else is new? So I felt like the only way to experience this game was to buy it and play it myself. Obviously, I'm a super small channel, so I buy every game I've done here. I don't do reviews super often. I'm trying to get into that more. These are my super honest reviews on what I like about games, what I don't like about games. I have some hot takes in here. There are some spoilers going in, so if you don't want to be spoiled, if you want to just experience the story on your own, then I would click away now. However, if you do like and appreciate this kind of content, for people like me to be able to review games just because it's fun, it's what we like to do, then go ahead and hit like and subscribe. It helps out the channel a lot. Last of Us 2 generally has a lot of good things going for it. Easily has some of the best graphics I've ever seen on a PS4 game. I am not lying when I say that. Last of Us 2 genuinely looks good. I mean, it looks up there with, God of War and and things like that. And I also just wanted to talk a little bit about the combat, because the combat in this game is actually fantastic. It's everything that was good about the first game, except it's vastly improved. Like, I actually looked forward to sneaking through all these areas and trying to ghost everybody. I mean, you can go loud if you want to and, go getting guns a-blazing, but, ammo is kind of scarce, so you have to make that decision. But for me, the melee combat felt smooth, it felt good. I really like the addition of the dodge button. It really gives a weight to the melee combat especially. And honestly, it was just kind of hilarious punching zombies to death as Abby. I mean, that made me laugh in Resident Evil 7. It makes me laugh here. Mainly because Abby is built. Abby is way more buff than most dudes I meet. There are also some really cool boss fights, and that just accentuates the combat. So things like that are fantastic, and I love those in this game. The level design has been vastly improved from the original game. With the original game, there was probably only 1 to 2 ways that you could kind of get around. This one, I've seen at least 3 to 4 different ways. I know I haven't explored everything, because there is a lot of exploration in this one, especially when you get to that wide open area out in Seattle. That is top-notch. We also kind of get some really cool scenes with Joel and Ellie, similar to the first one where they meet the giraffe and they pet the giraffes and everything, and that was really cool. You get scenes that are similar to that, but they're all in flashbacks. The only time you see Joel that isn't in a flashback is when he gets savagely beat to death with a golf club, and this is where the problems start to show up in this game. For me, it wasn't the fact that Joel died, right? It was the way that he died. I think from a writing standpoint, it just makes sense that the mentor character was probably going to die in the sequel, but the way that they did it was so bad. Just getting tortured and beaten to death. And in my mind, I don't think Joel would have ever been in that situation in the first place. It's he goes from trusting nobody to just going "Hi, I'm Joel, this is my brother Tommy, we live in a fucking town down by the river, would you guys like a sample of my blood? I got my credit card number here, and my social security number." And knowing what he did after the end of the first game, it doesn't make sense that he's just giving out his actual name to random armed strangers that he doesn't know. I mean, you have no idea who these people are. And I feel like what annoyed me most about this scene is you don't really get a confrontation where Abby really, like, confirms who she is. She just straight up murders him. And, like, you know nothing about her by that point in the game. The only reason I knew who she was because of spoilers that had leaked before the game, right? Now, this game, the characters all do things super out of character. Everyone is not who they were. Like, not only Joel. So Joel is an idiot. Ellie just becomes this, like, savage, revenge-fueled fucking super killer, like, Assassin's Creed status. And Tommy makes no sense as a character in this game. Like, he sets out, he tells Ellie, and he's like, no, you can't go for revenge. You know, you don't know how many they are. You know, what happens if they come back to Jackson? You don't know what you're going to bring down on us. We can't leave the town undefended. And that was his main priority in the first game, you know, was defending Jackson. Like, the only reason Joel and Ellie even got let into Jackson was because they knew Tommy. And then he just basically goes and he's like, yeah, fuck this, and just leaves. At the cost of his relationship, he leaves to go and hunt these people down. It just doesn't make sense to me as far as, like, his motivation. I just don't buy that he would leave Jackson the way that he did after helping found the place, basically. In my mind, I think Tommy believes that Jackson would be more important than getting revenge for his brother's death. So that brings me to my next point, actually, is really bad writing. And not only bad, but it's very lazy, too. By that, I mean there's just convenient excuses for everything, right? So, the story basically goes that these people, Joel gives them his name, these people show up, they kill Joel. Tommy goes after revenge. Ellie basically says that she's gonna go bring Tommy back, but you know Ellie's out for revenge as well. So that Ellie goes on this whole crusade about trying to find the people who were there when Joel died and kill them all. I mean, even, you know, if they weren't the ones that did it themselves. For some reason, she brings her girlfriend with her. I don't really know why you would bring your friend to go savagely murder some people. But anyway, so they set out together to go to Seattle. And this is kind of where things start to get weird for the story, is that it flip-flops all over the place. There are so many flashbacks and so many, like, time skips that for me, I found it getting really confusing. There was one point in the second half of the game where you play as Abby, and there's at least 5 flashbacks back to back to back to back, and I never knew what was going on. And this is why I kind of say the writing is lazy, because it's a convenient excuse to just throw in all the backstory for these characters that never existed before, try to make you care about them, and I mean, honestly, by this point, I just didn't care. The way that they did Joel for me was just enough to make me not like them, I felt like. However, as unlikable as the new characters are, what they did to Ellie was actually worse for me, because Ellie turns into this rage-driven monster who just goes around killing people brutally, way more brutally than the things that Abby does. I know in other reviews people say that, like, they don't want to play as Abby because they don't want to have to do all these terrible things as Abby. In the grand scheme of things, Abby kills a grand total of 2 people. Ellie kills every single person Abby loves in her life. And, like, think that Abby actually choosing to walk away in the fight that they had instead of killing Dina and killing Ellie, and I mean, what does that solve? Everyone's already dead, right? But it shows that Abby is actually a bigger person than Ellie. And you'll see what I mean, because at the end of the game, Ellie still can't let it go. Abby actually chooses to walk away. She's done with it, she lets Dina live, and she leaves. Throughout the game, when you play as Ellie, you are hunting down her friends in a very brutal fashion. Like, You couldn't kill Leah because you find out she's already dead, and then you get pissed off that she's already dead. You savagely beat a girl to death with a pipe just to get Abby's location. You stab a pregnant lady in the neck to get Abby's location. You shoot the father of the unborn child and make him watch the wife bleed out. Ellie does some objectively terrible things that are actually worse than Abby, and that's why I found myself liking Abby a little bit more than Ellie in this game, which was weird. I never thought I would say that about the person who killed Joel, but here we are. Abby is actually a more moral character than Ellie, and that is why by the end of it, like, I was actually rooting for Abby. Because I hated Ellie, and I hated the things that it made me do as Ellie. Ellie is actually the worst of us. They ruined Ellie as a character. Now, it also needs to be said that they did actually include a trans character and named Lev, and Lev's sister, Yara. This is actually kind of cool because, like, I know The Last of Us was basically the first game to include, like, LGBT characters. And, you know, the trend continues here, and that's great. You know, I'm all for inclusion. But kind of throughout the game, you get to this point where you play as Abby, and you're trying to kind of, like, you're feeling guilty, and you're trying to make up for all the bad things you did to, like, you know, Joel. And so you help out this kid and his sister, and you basically find out that Lev was, you know, born a woman, was promised to one of the village elders as a wife, but shaved his head so that he would look more like a boy, and then because of this, they basically, it was forbidden, they basically tried to kill him and his sister, and, you know, they ran them off the village, and so you're trying to help them escape, and when you do, you run into this cult leader, basically, and the cult leader breaks his sister's arm. It's funny, though, because she dies in about 2 seconds after she's introduced, so, like, literally most useless thing ever. And then you have to go on this series of quests because you find out that her arm is broken, it's not healing, she's got compartment syndrome, and you need to go on this quest to basically get her medication so that she can heal her arm. Now, this is like a 2 to 3 hour fetch quest, right? This is an extremely long fetch quest, and then by the end of it, she dies an hour later, making the whole thing pointless. And I feel like that was one of the things that pissed me off the most in the whole game, because it was kind of just like, what was the point? What was the point in any of this? When you get to the end of the game, right? The end of the game is objectively the most awful decision. They have, like, a false ending, right? They show what Ellie basically could have if she didn't go after Abby at the very end. And it makes no sense why Ellie would suddenly just choose to leave everything behind, pursue Abby, after all was said and done, after it was all over, where Abby spared Dina because she was pregnant. Ellie didn't show her pregnant friend the same courtesy, right? Ellie just murdered her. Abby actually spared Dina, and then said, I don't want to see your face ever again, and walked away, right? And then they're on this false ending where they're at a farm, everything's good, they have a family, they have a kid, they're taking care of all these farm animals, and, like, everything is good. Ellie basically decides, fuck everything, I've got everything I ever want, I've got a family, I've got kids, I've got this farm, I've got everything, I'm leaving all of this behind. Dina gives her an ultimatum that's like, if you leave, don't come back, right? And so Ellie is like, I can't, I have to go. So when she leaves, she gives everything up. And she pursues Abby. They have a confrontation on the beach where they fight. And then they start fighting. Abby basically is at a severe disadvantage here because Ellie is using a knife, which is, like, super unfair. even just because Ellie forced her into this fight that she didn't want. Eventually, over the course of the fight, Abby basically bites off Ellie's fingers. Ellie starts drowning her. She could have killed her, but she sees Joel for like 2 seconds, who, I don't know, basically he doesn't really say anything. He just kind of looks at her in this flashback, and she lets Abby go. And Abby and Lev leave, and that's how this game ends. It ends terrible. Like, Abby's friends are all dead. Lev's sister is dead. Ellie has given up everything. She has lost 2 fingers. She can't play guitar. Tommy is basically a cripple. And Tommy got divorced. Joel is dead. Nobody ends this game good. Like, Dina now has to raise this child in this world as a single parent because the father, Jesse, also died during the story. Everyone is dead. Nobody gets a happy ending. And I think that's what sucks about this game, because the first one had a bit of a controversial ending, yeah, but it was heartwarming because that was a decision all of us would have made, I think. It was a very human decision to choose to save the life of your daughter and just say, fuck the world, you know? This world is dead anyway. And for me, that's what made The Last of Us 1 great, and I don't think this game holds a candle to Last of Us 1. Last of Us 1 has already cemented itself as one of the best games ever made, and nothing this game does is going to change that. However, it doesn't fall in line with expectations that people had. Unfortunately, if I had to give this game a score, it would... I don't think the review bombs are right. I mean, it's not like a 2.8. It's probably closer to a 4 or 5 out of 10. I could not recommend the game at full price. Save your money. Just trust me, save your money. But it's not nearly as bad as people say. It's not nearly as good as people say. It falls somewhere in the middle, and it just does a terrible job at doing the things that it does. The story is awful. Do not recommend.